Marking an alpha during a one-night stand was almost unheard of. But marking Dante Moretti? That was something no one in their right mind would ever dare to imagine. Dante was the strongest Mafia Alpha in the underworld, the kind of man who could walk into a room without saying a word and make everyone fall silent. His reputation alone was enough to frighten people. Everyone was afraid of him. Everyone except me. Not because I didn't understand who Dante was. I did. I knew exactly how dangerous he could be. I'd watched him tear apart business deals with a single cold look. I'd seen powerful men twice my age lower their heads when he entered the room. I'd watched employees stumble over their words because they were terrified of disappointing him. Dante could be ruthless. He could also be incredibly rude. But strangely, he was never that way with me. I was the CEO of one of his companies, which meant I worked closely with him. We spent countless hours together discussing investments, acquisitions, and business strategies. And somehow, our conversations had become something I looked forward to. "You're late," Dante would say whenever I entered his office. 3 minutes. 3 minutes too long. I'd roll my eyes. "You survived." He'd give me that familiar cold stare. But then, somehow, the corner of his mouth would lift. With everyone else, Dante rarely bothered hiding his impatience. With me, he did. And I noticed. I noticed everything about him. Especially his scent. Dante's pheromones were impossible to ignore. His alpha scent was deep and powerful, filling the air whenever he was near. Sometimes, when he leaned over my desk to look at a document, I'd catch that scent and suddenly forget whatever I had been saying. It was ridiculous. Because I had a crush on him. And the worst part? I knew he had one on me too. We never said it aloud. We didn't need to. There was something between us that seemed to grow stronger every time we were together. A strange pull. As though something invisible was constantly drawing us closer. Sometimes we'd sit across from each other during meetings, and I'd catch him staring. "What?" I'd ask. "Nothing. You're staring." "I'm thinking. About me." His eyes would narrow. "Don't flatter yourself." I'd laugh. And for a man everyone feared, Dante would simply shake his head and continue working. I never treated him like a monster. I treated him like the man I admired. And perhaps that was why Dante treated me differently too. I had seen the way he spoke to others. Cold. Impatient. Sometimes brutally blunt. But when it came to me, his voice would soften without him even realizing it. That was what made our relationship so dangerous. Because neither of us wanted to admit how close we'd become. Until that business trip. After we closed an important deal, Dante and I joined the others for drinks. The celebration lasted longer than expected, and eventually, everyone else left. Only Dante and I remained. We were both drunk. And suddenly, there was no distance left between us. We talked. We laughed. We admitted things we'd never dared to say sober. I remember looking at him and thinking that I'd never seen him look so relaxed. His scent surrounded me. So strong. So familiar. And that strange pull between us felt stronger than ever. Something inside me whispered that I was supposed to be close to him. That I belonged beside him. Neither of us fought it that night. We kissed, and the feelings we'd kept hidden for so long finally surfaced. The rest of the night became a blur of emotion and instinct. Our pheromones filled the room, surrounding us until neither of us could think clearly. And somewhere in that haze, without realizing what I was doing, I marked him. I didn't know. Not until morning. I woke to Dante standing beside the bed, his hand pressed against his neck. His expression was terrifying. "What did you do?" I looked at his neck. Then my heart stopped. The mark was unmistakable. "I?" Dante's eyes hardened. "You marked me." I was just as shocked as he was. "Dante, I swear, I didn't mean to." He looked furious. "No one marks me." "I know. Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes, but you need to calm down." We were both drunk. I didn't do it deliberately. It just happened. He didn't listen. He grabbed his clothes and headed toward the door. "Dante." He stopped. For one brief moment, I thought he'd turn around. But he didn't. He walked out without another word. I stood there staring at the closed door, wondering how something that had felt so natural between us could have ended so badly. I thought that was the end. I thought Dante would never forgive me. I had no idea that 1 month later, the same man who had walked away from me in anger would receive news that would change both our lives forever. Dante Moretti was pregnant. And somehow, he was carrying my triplets. This version of the audiobook has been edited to comply with YouTube community guidelines. For the full, uncut, and uncensored version of this audiobook, please check out my Patreon, where you'll also find many other stories and exclusive content. You'll find the link to my Patreon in the description. For the rest of the day, Dante made sure I understood one thing. He wanted me nowhere near him. He barely looked at me after leaving the hotel. On the private jet, he chose the seat farthest from mine and kept his collar pulled high around his neck, hiding the mark beneath his clothes. Every time I glanced in his direction, he was either looking through the window or speaking to one of his men. Have the documents sent to my office. Move the meeting to tomorrow. Increase security around the estate. His voice remained as cold and commanding as ever, but I could see the strain behind it. His fingers occasionally went to his neck. His jaw remained tightly clenched, and I knew exactly why. The mark. I had marked him, and whether he wanted to accept it or not, his body was already reacting to the bond. A marking wasn't simply a bite that healed with time. During the first few days, the marked person could suffer badly when separated from their marking mate. Their body craved the other's scent and presence. Dante needed me. He needed my scent. He needed to be close to the person who had marked him. But he was Dante Moretti. He would rather suffer in silence than admit he needed anyone. I wanted to go to him. More than once, I almost stood up and crossed the jet. But every time I saw his expression, I lost my courage. He was angry with me. And I couldn't blame him. When we finally landed, Dante walked off the jet without waiting for anyone. I hurried after him. Dante. He stopped. I swallowed. Are you feeling okay? He glanced at me. Then he simply nodded. I'm fine. Before I could say anything else, he turned toward his security team. Take the eastern route. I don't want anyone following us. And make sure the estate is fully secured before I arrive. He continued giving orders as though nothing was wrong. But I noticed his face. His cheeks were turning red. His skin looked unusually warm. His breathing was slightly heavier than normal. He was hurting. And badly. I wanted to tell him to stop pretending. I wanted to take him home myself. But Dante gave me one final look before getting into his car. It was a warning. Stay away. So I watched him leave. I tried to convince myself that giving him space was the right thing to do. I lasted until evening. Then I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Dante's estate. His home was massive, surrounded by high walls and enough security to protect a small country. Guards stood at every entrance, and there were cameras watching almost every corridor. But I had been there too many times to be treated like a stranger. The guards recognized me and let me pass. I didn't stop anywhere. I went directly to Dante's bedroom. I knocked. Dante? Nothing. I knocked again. Open the door. A long silence followed. Then, click. The door opened. And my heart sank. Dante was standing there, but he looked nothing like the man who had walked off the jet that afternoon. His face was flushed. His hair was disheveled. His breathing was uneven. Heat radiated from his body, and even through the doorway I could smell his distressed scent. He looked exhausted. He looked like he had spent the entire day fighting something he couldn't defeat. Before I could say anything, Dante grabbed the front of my shirt and shoved me against the wall. His eyes were filled with fury. I should have killed you. I stared at him. I should have killed the person who dared to mark me. His grip tightened. And I still can. I should have been frightened. Anyone else would have been. But I couldn't see the terrifying mafia boss everyone else saw. I only saw a man in pain. Dante? I reached for him. Instead of pushing him away, I wrapped my arms around him. He froze. I slowly turned my face toward his neck. Then I pressed a gentle kiss against his mark. I know you're angry. His grip loosened. I know you never wanted this. I held him tighter. But I didn't do it intentionally. Neither of us knew what would happen that night. He remained silent. I ran my hand gently over his back. Maybe it happened for a reason. Dante's breathing became shaky. And I'm here now. I kissed his forehead. You don't have to fight it alone anymore. Something inside him finally broke. His forehead dropped onto my shoulder. His hand slowly released my shirt. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't recognize it, he asked, "Why does it hurt so much?" My chest tightened. I wrapped my arms around him more securely. Because the bond is still new. I stroked his hair. Your body is adjusting to it. Another kiss against his forehead. It won't hurt this badly forever. Just stay close to me tonight. For once, Dante didn't argue. He simply nodded. I helped him to the bed and sat beside him. He rested against my chest, and I carefully ran my fingers through his hair. The man who could command hundreds of people with a single sentence now seemed to need nothing more than someone to hold him. I kissed his forehead. Then his temple. Then, carefully, the mark on his neck. His breathing gradually slowed. His body relaxed. His eyes became heavier. Until eventually, Dante Moretti fell asleep in my arms. I stared down at him. He looked completely different while sleeping. No cold expression. No intimidating stare. No ruthless mafia boss. Just Dante. My Dante. I continued stroking his hair, afraid to disturb him. His scent was usually incredibly powerful. I could recognize it from across an entire room. Tonight, however, it was faint. Almost fragile. The pain had weakened it. And strangely, that hurt me. I wanted to take that pain away from him. I wanted to see him strong again. But as I held him against my chest, a quiet warmth settled inside me. For years, I'd admired Dante Moretti from a distance. I'd watched everyone fear him while I secretly admired the man behind the reputation. Now he was sleeping peacefully in my arms. Trusting me. Depending on me. And I realized something that frightened me more than the mark ever could. I didn't want to let him go. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. "My mate," I whispered. Then I kissed his mark again. And held him a little tighter. That night, I stayed with Dante. I couldn't leave him alone when he was still struggling with the bond. He was exhausted, overheated, and stubborn enough to insist he could take care of himself even when he could barely stand without swaying. So I helped him into a warm bath, stayed nearby until he was steady again, and brought him back to bed. Then came the hardest part. Food. Dante stared at the bowl of soup in my hands with open irritation. "I'm not hungry. You need to eat." "No, Dante." I said no. I sighed and sat beside him. He gave me a murderous look. I held out the spoon. "Just a little." He refused several times before finally giving in. I fed him slowly, one spoonful at a time, until he had managed enough to satisfy me. Afterward, I expected him to push me away again. Instead, the opposite happened. The moment I tried to get up, Dante caught my hand. "Don't." I looked at him. "I was just getting water." Later. Then he pulled me back beside him. His arms wrapped around my waist, and he buried his face against my neck. He inhaled deeply. My scent. Then again. And again. I couldn't help smiling. The same Dante Moretti who had spent the entire day avoiding me was now refusing to let me move even a few inches away. The bond had made him clingy. But I didn't mind. I wrapped my arms around him and let him stay as close as he wanted. Whenever his body grew restless from the heat, I stayed patient and careful with him, making sure he was comfortable and never pushing him beyond what he could handle. Our closeness became another quiet way of strengthening the bond between us. The next 2 days passed almost the same way. We stayed together. We ate together. We slept together. We talked when Dante felt well enough. And whenever the bond became difficult, I was there. Little by little, Dante stopped fighting it. He began seeking me out without hesitation. He would pull me closer whenever he wanted my scent. Sometimes he simply rested against my chest without saying anything. The bond between us grew stronger with every passing hour. By the third morning, Dante finally seemed like himself again. The heat had disappeared. His face had returned to its normal color. His scent was strong once more. He sat at the edge of the bed while I stood near the window. Then he spoke. "What happens now?" I turned toward him. He looked unusually serious. "Why did this happen, Soren?" I didn't answer. Dante looked down for a moment. "I always felt something around you." His voice softened. A warmth. Something that made me want you near me. I thought it was because I trusted you. He looked at me. "I never thought you could be my fated mate." I remained silent. "And honestly," he hesitated. "I never wanted an alpha." That sentence hurt more than I expected. "I wanted an omega," he continued. "Someone who could give me an heir. Someone I could build a family with." I looked at him quietly. Then I finally told him the truth. "I'm not an alpha." Dante's eyes narrowed. "What?" "I'm an enigma." The room went silent. Dante stared at me. "You're an enigma?" I nodded. His expression immediately hardened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't get the chance." "You could have told me." "That night, I barely remember what happened," I admitted. "We were both drunk. And the next morning, you were so angry about the mark that I couldn't get a word in." Dante said nothing. "You were in pain afterward," I continued. "You weren't exactly in the mood to listen to me then either." I took a breath. "I wasn't hiding it from you, Dante. It simply never came up." His eyes remained fixed on me. "And yes," I added quietly, "if you want a family, we can have one." That was when Dante's anger exploded. "You should have told me." He stepped toward me. I tried to calm him. "Dante, listen." He struck me. I staggered back in shock. When he moved again, I instinctively raised my arms to protect myself. "Stop." My enigma instinct surged. I caught his wrists. The air around us seemed to change. My voice dropped into something deeper and more commanding. "Don't make me angry, Dante." He froze. I immediately hated the power in my own voice. But I was too angry to stop. Nothing about that night was planned. Not the mark. Not the bond. Nothing. I stared at him. And what I feel for you is real. My voice trembled. That's why I stayed. I released one of his wrists. That's why I tolerated your attitude. Your anger. Your endless orders. Because I love you. Dante's expression slowly changed. And if you don't want this bond? I whispered, there is a way to break it. He stopped moving. The anger disappeared from his face. But what replaced it wasn't relief. It was hurt. Deep, unmistakable hurt. And suddenly, I understood. My enigma side had frightened him. The power behind my anger had been too much. I looked at him and felt my heart drop. Dante? I immediately pulled him into my arms. I'm sorry. I kissed his forehead. I'm really sorry. Another kiss. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I held him tightly. I never wanted to frighten you. But Dante remained silent. He didn't return my embrace. After a long moment, he quietly said, I need some time alone. My arms slowly fell away. I nodded. Okay. I didn't argue. I walked toward the door. Before leaving, I looked back at him one last time. Dante wouldn't meet my eyes. I stepped outside and closed the door. And for the first time since the night I had marked him, I felt completely helpless. I had wanted to protect Dante. Instead, my own power had become something that hurt him. And that was the last thing I ever wanted. The silence lasted for days. After Dante had asked for time alone, I gave it to him. At least, I tried to. I waited for a message. Nothing came. I called him. He didn't answer. I sent him texts, but every one remained unread. Eventually, I stopped counting how many times I'd checked my phone. I told myself that Dante simply needed time to process everything. But a part of me feared he had already made his decision. Then, late one evening, someone knocked on my door. I opened it without thinking. And there he was. Dante. My heart immediately jumped. But the feeling lasted only a second. Because someone was standing beside him. An Omega. A breathtakingly beautiful Omega dressed in expensive, elegant clothes. He looked calm and refined, the kind of person who seemed perfectly suited to the world Dante belonged to. I stared at him before looking back at Dante. Who is he? Dante's face remained unreadable. This is Adrian. Adrian politely nodded. Then Dante said the words that made my heart go completely still. I'm going to marry him. I couldn't speak. Dante continued as if he were discussing a business contract. And before that happens, I want our bond removed. No emotion. No hesitation. Nothing. It hurt more than if he had shouted at me. I looked at Adrian again. And strangely, something caught my attention. Dante wasn't looking at him with love. There was no softness in his eyes. No longing. Nothing like the invisible pull I'd always felt between us. Maybe that was when I finally accepted the truth. There was no such thing as a fated mate. I'd believed our bond meant we were destined for each other. But perhaps it had only been instinct. An accident. Something that could be broken. I lowered my eyes. If that's what you want, I'll agree. Dante nodded. The separation procedure has 3 phases. The first 2 are assessments to determine whether the bond can be safely removed. The third is the actual separation. He looked directly at me. I'll give you the date for the first phase. All right. Dante turned toward the door. Adrian had already gone ahead and was waiting beside the car. But before Dante followed him, I couldn't stop myself from asking, why are you getting married so suddenly? He paused. I never heard anything about this before. Dante looked at me. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You think you're the only one who can keep secrets? I blinked. I have secrets too. He glanced toward the car. Adrian has been my fiancé for a long time. My heart sank again. It's an arranged marriage, he explained. Our families agreed to it years ago. His family is respected, and the arrangement was considered beneficial for both sides. I remained silent. Why wasn't it public? Because of his safety. Dante's expression became serious. My enemies don't need another reason to target him. He looked toward Adrian. His grandmother isn't well. She wants to see us married while she still can. I nodded slowly. So this wasn't something Dante had decided overnight. Adrian had been part of his life for years. I was simply the unexpected complication. Before leaving, Dante looked at me one last time. And don't tell anyone about what happened between us. I knew exactly what he meant. The mark. I nodded. My reputation is important, he said coldly. I'm Dante Moretti. If people learn that someone marked me, they'll consider it a weakness. I won't tell anyone. Dante nodded. Then he walked toward the car. Adrian was already waiting for him. I watched as Dante opened the door and got inside. For a moment, he looked back at me. Our eyes met. I wanted to say something. Anything. But nothing came. The car drove away. I remained standing outside my home long after it disappeared. The cold night air touched my face. I told myself I was okay. I told myself I had accepted it. But when I finally went inside and closed the door, the tears I'd been fighting all evening finally escaped. I covered my mouth to keep the sound from coming out. My chest hurt. I had loved Dante quietly. I had loved the man beneath the terrifying reputation. And now that love was being taken away from me piece by piece. The bond would be removed. Dante would marry Adrian. And eventually, he would forget me. I wiped my tears. Maybe there really was no such thing as a fated mate. Maybe I had simply been foolish enough to believe there was. Still, as I stood alone in the darkness, one thought refused to leave me. I loved him. And no matter how much I tried to accept losing him, my heart wasn't ready to let him go. Next day Dante sent me the date for the first phase. I stared at the message for several minutes. 4 days. In 4 days, I would stand beside Dante Moretti beneath the gaze of the moon goddess and begin severing the bond one had once believed was meant to last forever. When I arrived at the ancient chamber, Dante was already there. Adrian stood beside him, while Rowan, Dante's head of security, waited a few steps behind them. The chamber was ancient and almost unnaturally quiet. Pale moonlight poured through the opening in the ceiling, illuminating the old stone floor where countless fated bonds had been blessed, and, on rare occasions, broken. Today, mine would be one of them. I tried not to look at Dante too much. It was difficult. He looked as handsome as ever, dressed in dark clothes with that familiar cold expression on his face. But what caught my attention was Adrian. He stayed close to Dante. Very close. His fingers rested lightly against Dante's arm while they waited. Whenever he spoke, he leaned toward him. He smiled at Dante in that sweet, almost playful way that made something ugly twist inside my chest. Jealousy. I hated it. I wanted to pull Adrian away. I wanted to tell him to stop touching Dante. For one moment, anger surged through me so fiercely that my hands curled into fists. But I forced myself to breathe. I couldn't lose control. Not here. Not in front of Dante. I was an enigma, and I knew exactly how dangerous my anger could become. So I swallowed everything. I showed nothing. The first phase began. Dante and I stood inside the sacred circle as the moon goddess's presence descended upon the chamber. The bond reacted immediately. A warm sensation spread through my body. For a brief moment, I could feel Dante as clearly as I had during those first days when he had slept in my arms. His scent. His presence. That invisible connection between us. Then the ritual began weakening it. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to feel it disappear. When the first phase finally ended, the chamber fell silent again. I opened my eyes. Dante was already looking toward Adrian. That tiny movement hurt more than I expected. We left the chamber separately. Outside, I found myself standing alone for a moment before Dante approached me. His eyes searched my face. "Soren, are you okay?" I immediately smiled. "I'm fine." He continued watching me. "Are you sure?" "Yeah." I couldn't let him see how much this was hurting. I couldn't tell him that watching Adrian cling to him made my chest burn. Dante eventually nodded. "Okay, then." He paused before adding, "See you next week." I nodded. "See you." He walked away. I watched him leave with Adrian and Rowan. Only after they disappeared from sight did I let my smile disappear. The first phase was over. But somehow, I felt worse than before. The following week, I returned for the second phase. And once again, Dante arrived with Adrian and Rowan. Nothing had changed. If anything, Adrian seemed even more comfortable around Dante. He stayed beside him throughout the entire ritual. He would tug lightly at Dante's sleeve, lean against his shoulder, and occasionally give him an innocent little smile. That smile nearly drove me insane. At one point, I wanted to punch him. I wanted to make him stop. My chest became so tight that breathing felt difficult. But I controlled myself. I reminded myself why I was there. I wasn't going to embarrass myself. I wasn't going to let Dante see my jealousy. I wasn't going to give Adrian the satisfaction. So I stood quietly and pretended I didn't care. But Dante kept looking at me. Again. And again. Sometimes our eyes met across the chamber. His gaze lingered for a few seconds before he looked away. I didn't understand it. If he had chosen Adrian, why did he keep watching me? The second phase eventually ended. When we stepped outside, Dante seemed unusually distant. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "The final procedure will be in 2 weeks." I nodded. "All right." He didn't say anything else. Neither did I. Dante turned and walked away with Adrian, Rowan following behind them. I remained where I was. 2 weeks. Only 2 weeks remained before the bond between Dante Moretti and me would be gone completely. I told myself I could handle it. I had to. But as I watched Dante disappear from sight, my heart whispered something I refused to admit aloud. I didn't want the bond to end. I wanted Dante. And no matter how hard I tried to hide it, my heart still believed that Dante Moretti was my mate. A week before the final separation, Dante came to my house again. I hadn't heard from him since our last meeting, so seeing him standing outside my door immediately made my heart race. I stepped aside. "Come in." Dante entered quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked directly at me. "I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop. I stared at him. "What?" "I confirmed it this morning." His voice was calm, but I could see something uncertain in his eyes. "The doctor says I'm 4 weeks pregnant." 4 weeks. My heart sank. 4 weeks ago. Our night together. The night that had started this entire mess. Dante was carrying my child. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out and hold him. Another part wanted to celebrate. But I knew Dante. He had wanted an Omega. He had wanted a traditional family. And now he had Adrian. The man he had been promised to for years. I couldn't imagine Dante wanting to carry a child that would complicate everything. So I forced myself to remain calm. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Dante's eyes stayed on mine. "I mean it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm just glad you told me." I wanted to tell him that I wanted the baby. That I wanted to be there for every moment. That I wanted to build a family with him. That I wanted him to choose me. But the words remained trapped inside me. "The decision is yours, Dante." He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Yes." It was the biggest lie I'd ever told. I wasn't sure. I wasn't okay. I wanted him. I wanted our child. I wanted the life we could have had. But I couldn't bring myself to ask him to abandon everything he'd planned. Dante finally nodded. "I'll tell you what I decide." Then he left. The door closed behind him. I stood there alone, staring at it. My hand slowly moved to my chest. For the first time, I understood how much I had wanted something I'd never dared to dream about. A family. With Dante. 1 week later, I returned to the ancient chamber for the final phase. The chamber looked exactly as it had during the first 2 ceremonies. Only this time, everything felt different. Dante was dressed in white. So was I. For one brief moment, seeing him standing there made me wonder what it would have looked like if we'd come here for a wedding instead. But reality quickly returned. Adrian was there. Rowan stood nearby as well. However, neither of them was permitted inside the chamber for the final phase. Before the ceremony began, the attendant placed noise-canceling headphones over Dante's ears and then mine. We weren't allowed to hear the sacred chanting during the separation. The doors closed. Dante and I stood facing each other. Then the procedure began. For nearly an hour, the ancient ritual continued. I felt the bond pulling at me. It was as though something inside my chest was desperately trying to hold on to Dante. I wanted to reach for him. But I couldn't move. Slowly, the connection weakened. Then, it was over. I opened my eyes. Dante stood across from me. The bond was supposed to be gone. But when I breathed in his scent, something unexpected happened. His scent seemed even more beautiful than before. It wrapped around me. Familiar. Warm. Addictive. And suddenly, I felt an overwhelming rush of love. More than I'd ever felt before. My chest ached. I looked at Dante in confusion. Why did it hurt? Why did I still feel connected to him? Hadn't the bond been broken? We eventually stepped outside. Adrian immediately approached Dante. He wrapped his arms around him and kissed him. I stood there watching. I forced myself not to react. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. The bond was gone. Dante was free. He had chosen his future. But then I noticed something that made my heart stop. Dante wasn't looking at Adrian. His eyes were on me. Even while Adrian kissed him, Dante kept staring directly at me. There was something in his expression I couldn't understand. Something almost desperate. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned around and walked away. I didn't wait for Dante. I didn't wait for Adrian. I didn't wait for Rowan. I simply left. That night, the pain in my chest became unbearable. I sat alone, staring into the darkness. The bond was supposed to be gone. Yet I could still feel him. I could still sense Dante somewhere deep inside me. His scent remained in my memory. His presence remained beneath my skin. And no matter how many times I told myself it was over, my heart kept whispering the same impossible truth. Dante was still my mate. 3 days after the final ceremony, my phone finally buzzed. A message from Dante. "Soren. Come to my estate tomorrow at 12:30. Nothing else. No explanation. No indication of why he wanted me there. I stared at those few words for a long time before finally replying. I'll be there. The next afternoon, I arrived at Dante's estate. He was waiting for me. There was something unusually serious about his expression, but he didn't explain anything. He simply turned and walked through the mansion. I followed him until we reached the private hospital wing. "Dante, what's going on?" He stopped outside a room. "I'm going to terminate the pregnancy." My entire body went still. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Our child. He was carrying our child, and he was planning to end the pregnancy. Dante looked at me. "I want you there." My heart screamed at me to stop him. To tell him that I wanted our baby. That I wanted him. That I wanted the family I'd secretly dreamed about. But I'd spent weeks believing Dante didn't want any of that with me. So I swallowed everything. Okay. Inside the room, the doctors began preparing. I stayed beside Dante, trying to keep my expression under control while my heart beat faster and faster. Eventually, Dante lay back on the bed. He turned his head toward me. "Soren." I looked at him. "Are you really okay with this?" I nodded. "Yes." The lie tasted bitter. I wasn't okay. Not even close. Then a sudden, sharp pain struck my chest. I instinctively pressed my hand against it. Dante noticed. His expression changed immediately. "Nurse. Leave us." The nurse hesitated. "Sir. Please." She stepped out. The door closed. Dante slowly got off the bed and walked toward me. Then his hand struck my shoulder. Once. Twice. I stared at him in shock. "You liar." His voice trembled. "You are such a liar, Soren." "Dante? You told me you loved me." His eyes were already wet. "You told me our bond was real." Another frustrated hit landed against my shoulder. "And now you're sitting here telling me you're fine with losing our child." You don't love me." His voice cracked. "You never did." My heart broke. "Dante, that's not true." "Then explain it." He stared at me through his tears. "I thought you believed in us. I thought you believed I was your mate." He shook his head. "But you proved me wrong." I couldn't understand. Then he said the words that finally made everything clear. "I thought you trusted me enough to know I could never willingly hurt my own child." His hand moved protectively over his stomach. "Our child." My breath caught. "But you sat beside me and calmly accepted the abortion." His eyes filled with hurt. "You made me feel like you thought I was some heartless man capable of killing his own baby." I went completely silent. He thought I'd judged him that way. He thought I'd looked at him and seen nothing but the ruthless mafia boss everyone feared. "Dante? I thought you knew me." His voice became painfully quiet. "I thought you knew I could never do that." He sat down and covered his face. His shoulders began shaking. "I believed you." And then he started crying. Something inside me broke. Suddenly, the pain I'd felt whenever I looked at Dante made sense. It wasn't because our bond was disappearing. It was because Dante had been hurting too. He had been waiting for me to fight for him. Waiting for me to say I wanted him. Waiting for me to say I wanted our child. And I'd given him nothing but silence. I dropped to my knees. "Dante, please look at me." He turned away. "You screamed at me that day," he whispered. I froze. "You pushed me away when I was still weak and trying to understand what was happening." His voice trembled. "You weren't gentle with me." I lowered my eyes. "But when Adrian kept getting close to me." He looked at me. "When he touched me. When he kissed me." His expression crumbled. "You stood there and said nothing." I couldn't breathe. "How can you say you love me if you can watch your mate with another man and not even fight for him?" That was when I finally understood. I'd hurt him more than I had ever realized. I immediately reached for him. "I'm sorry." Dante resisted for a moment, but I carefully brought him to the couch and sat down, pulling him onto my lap. I held him against my chest. "I'm so sorry." I kissed his forehead. I was angry. Another kiss. I was jealous. I held him tighter. "But I thought Adrian was your fiancé." Dante looked at me. "He isn't." I blinked. "What? Adrian isn't my fiancé." My heart stopped again. "Then who is he?" "An actor." I stared at him. "I hired him." "You hired him?" Dante nodded reluctantly. "I wanted to make you jealous." My mouth fell open. "I was angry after you screamed at me. I thought seeing another man close to me would finally make you realize what you felt." "For how long?" 2 days. I stared at him. 2 days? He sighed. "I thought that would be enough." Then his expression turned irritated. "But you barely reacted." I almost laughed through my tears. "I thought he was your fiancé." Dante muttered something under his breath. "And I ended up paying that bastard almost $1 million. Despite everything, a tiny laugh escaped me. Then another thought hit me. If Adrian wasn't your fiancé? I looked at Dante. Why did we go through the bond separation? Dante stared at me. We didn't. What? The ritual couldn't break our bond. He touched the mark on his neck. It wasn't designed to destroy it. My eyes widened. It was designed to strengthen it. Everything suddenly made sense. The ache in my chest. The beautiful scent I'd sensed after the ceremony. The connection that had never truly disappeared. I had never lost Dante. Our bond had only become stronger. Tears filled my eyes. I pulled him tightly against me. I'm sorry. Again. And again. I didn't understand. I kissed his forehead. I didn't realize what you were trying to tell me. My voice broke. I love you, Dante. He looked at me. Every night, I stayed awake thinking about you. I wanted to call you. I wanted to tell you I wanted our child. I wanted to tell you I wanted a family with you. I cupped his face. But I was afraid. I thought loving you meant respecting your decision, even if it destroyed me. Dante stared into my eyes. Are you telling the truth? I nodded. Yes. I kissed him through my tears. I want you. Another kiss. I want our baby. Another. I want our family. Dante's expression finally softened. Then I remembered Adrian. My jealousy returned instantly. I gave Dante a tiny playful slap on the arm. Then why did you let Adrian kiss you? Dante sighed. Because that was my last attempt to make you jealous. You actually let him kiss you? Yes. I stared at him, still offended. Then I pulled him closer. I kissed one corner of his mouth. Then the other. Slowly, deliberately, as if I were reclaiming every kiss I'd watched Adrian steal. I kissed him again, lingering against his lips until they were flushed and tender. When I finally pulled back, I stayed close. These are mine. Dante stared at me. I gave him another soft kiss. Only mine. He immediately gave me a light slap on the shoulder. And don't you dare scream at your mate again. I blinked. You can show your anger toward me, but you can't even stop another man from kissing your mate? I thought he was your fiancé. He wasn't. I didn't know. Dante narrowed his eyes. If you ever scream at me like that again, I'll leave. My heart immediately tightened. No. I wrapped my arms around him. I won't let that happen. I kissed his forehead. I'll talk to you. Another kiss. I'll trust you. I rested my forehead against his. And I'll never make you doubt how much I love you again. Dante finally relaxed in my arms. For the first time in weeks, the ache inside my chest disappeared. Our bond was still there. Our child was still there. And the man I had spent weeks believing I'd lost was finally in my arms again. My mate. My family. My future. After everything was finally cleared between us, Dante didn't let me out of his arms for the rest of the day. The feared mafia boss who could make an entire room fall silent with one look was suddenly impossibly clingy with me. Whenever I tried to get up, his fingers tightened around mine. Whenever I moved even a little too far away, he'd pull me back against him. I eventually laughed. Dante, I'm not going anywhere. I know. Then why won't you let me go? Because I don't want to. That simple answer made my heart melt. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about the future, something we'd never dared to do before. What happens after the baby is born? I asked. Dante rested against my chest, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing circles over my hand. I'll continue handling the business. I looked at him incredulously. You're planning to run an entire empire while raising a newborn? I've managed worse. I laughed. You'll be carrying our child and still giving orders to half the underworld? Dante gave me a look. I'm still the boss. Not when the baby starts crying at 3 in the morning. He frowned. I'll handle that too. I couldn't stop smiling. We'll handle it together. Dante looked at me for a moment before nodding. Together. That word meant more to me than he probably realized. Then, completely out of nowhere, Dante said, there's something else. What? I'm deducting 1 million from your salary. I stared at him. What? 1 million? Why, Adrian? I blinked. Dante's expression remained perfectly serious. I paid him 1 million to pretend to be my boyfriend. I burst out laughing. Dante. You didn't get jealous. Because I thought he was your fiancé. Still your fault. I laughed even harder. You can deduct my entire salary if you want. Dante raised an eyebrow. Your entire salary? I leaned closer. I don't care about money anymore. I smiled. I'm marrying the boss himself. For a moment, Dante simply stared at me. Then a small, genuine smile appeared on his face. You're ridiculous. And you're mine. His smile grew slightly. Unfortunately. I pulled him closer. Fortunately. 2 weeks passed before our next appointment. We went expecting to hear that everything was progressing normally. Instead, the doctor looked at the screen and smiled. There are 3. I blinked. 3 what? The doctor laughed. 3 babies. Silence. I looked at Dante. Then back at the doctor. Triplets. The doctor nodded. Congratulations. My first reaction wasn't excitement. It was fear. I immediately looked at Dante. He was staring at the screen. And then he smiled. Actually smiled. 3. I swallowed. Dante? I'm happy. But. I hesitated. You're carrying 3 babies. He looked at me as though I had just stated the obvious. I know. Do you understand what that means? Yes. You'll have to go through everything 3 times. Dante shrugged. I'm strong enough. I knew he was. Dante was only 4 years younger than me, yet he had the strength and presence of someone who seemed capable of surviving anything. But that didn't stop me from worrying. To everyone else, Dante was the terrifying mafia boss who ruled his world without fear. To me, he was my little mate. My ridiculously strong, intimidating little mate with a huge body and an even bigger personality. And the thought of him enduring the pain of giving birth to 3 babies frightened me more than I wanted to admit. I don't want you to suffer. Dante looked at me. I'm not scared. I'm scared for you. His expression softened. Then he placed a hand over his stomach. I'm actually happy it's triplets. Why? He gave me a small smile. Because then I won't have to go through another pregnancy. I stared at him. That's your reason? Yes. I couldn't help laughing. But even while I laughed, I still couldn't completely shake the fear. 3 babies. 3 times the responsibility. 3 times the danger. And the person I loved would be the one carrying them. I silently promised myself that I would do everything I could to make sure Dante never had to face any of it alone. A few weeks later, I moved into Dante's estate permanently. Our lives gradually settled into something neither of us had expected. Dante began stepping back from the business. He didn't abandon it. He was still Dante Moretti, after all. But he stopped attending every meeting and traveling for every negotiation. His parents took over most of the day-to-day operations, allowing him to remain involved from home. Dante's empire continued running smoothly. He simply stopped putting himself at the center of everything. And I changed too. I worked harder at my own company. Not because I needed more money. Not because I wanted a bigger title. But because I knew our lives were about to change completely. I wanted to finish everything I could while I still had the time. Once our babies arrived, I wanted to give Dante and our children my full attention. I wanted to be there for every sleepless night. Every doctor's appointment. Every first smile. Every first word. Every little moment. And most importantly, I wanted Dante to know that he didn't have to carry the weight of our family alone. Some evenings, I'd return home exhausted and find Dante sitting comfortably in the living room, one hand resting protectively over his growing stomach. The moment he saw me, his expression would soften. I'd walk over and kneel in front of him. How are my babies? Dante would roll his eyes. They're fine. And my mate? I'm considering firing him. I'd laugh and kiss his hand. You'd miss me. I already do when you're gone. Those little moments became my favorite part of every day. Because our lives were no longer about fear, secrets, or misunderstandings. We were building something. A home. A marriage. A family. And 3 tiny lives were growing inside the man I loved. Our triplets. Our future. Our everything. My plan to work as hard as possible before the triplets arrived lasted exactly until Dante decided he didn't want me going anywhere. At first, I thought he was joking. You have another meeting? Yes. Cancel it. I looked up from my laptop. Dante. I need you here. You have an entire security team. I don't need them. I need you. That was how it started. Then came the messages whenever I was at the office. When are you coming home? How long is the meeting? Are you done yet? Eventually, Dante stopped asking. He simply walked into my office one afternoon, placed my laptop aside and said, You're taking leave. For how long? Until the babies are born. I stared at him. You can't just decide that. I just did. His parents were no more helpful. When I mentioned that I wanted to continue working, his mother immediately shook her head. Don't worry about the business. We'll handle everything. His father agreed. Dante needs you now. Let us take care of the rest. I looked at Dante. He was standing behind them with his arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. But his eyes were giving him away. He wanted me home. So, when Dante reached 5 months of pregnancy, I finally stepped away from most of my responsibilities. And honestly, it turned out to be the right decision. Because by then, Dante needed me more than ever. His belly had grown incredibly quickly. 3 babies were growing inside him, and his stomach was already so large that sometimes I found myself staring in disbelief. Dante, however, seemed fascinated by it. And apparently, so was he with my hands. Rub it. I'd be sitting beside him, reading something, when his voice would suddenly come from the couch. I would look over. Dante would already be lifting his shirt slightly, exposing his enormous stomach. Come here. You could say please. I could. And? I won't. I'd laugh and walk over anyway. The moment I placed my palm against his belly, his expression would soften. Better? Much. I would slowly rub his stomach while he leaned back against me. The contrast never stopped amusing me. Because outside the estate, Dante Moretti was still the terrifying Mafia Alpha everyone feared. Sometimes he'd be on the phone with his men, giving orders so loudly that I would genuinely worry about the babies. How many times do I have to tell you? His voice would echo through the room. Fix it before tonight. I'd glance at his stomach. Poor babies. But then he'd hang up, turn toward me and immediately become a completely different person. Soren. What? Come here. I'd sit beside him. He'd pull me close and rest his head against my chest. And suddenly the terrifying mafia boss was gone. In his place was my 25-year-old mate who simply wanted to be held. His dependence on me only grew with the pregnancy. On his difficult days, Dante sometimes refused to eat. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten all day. I don't want anything. Dante. No. Then he'd simply open his arms. Just hold me. So I'd hold him. Eventually, I'd bring him something light to eat and feed him myself. Some days, Dante would lie across the couch with his enormous stomach exposed, one hand slowly rubbing over it while the other held his phone. Move the meeting to Friday. I would bring a spoon to his mouth. Send Rowan instead. Another spoonful. And tell them I don't want another mistake. I'd stare at him. A mafia boss giving terrifying orders while being casually fed by his mate. Sometimes I couldn't help laughing. Dante would immediately glare at me. What? Nothing. Why are you laughing? You're just? I struggled not to laugh again. Very intimidating. Good. He'd open his mouth for another spoonful. I would laugh anyway. And then there were the mood swings. Dante absolutely refused to admit he had them. One minute he'd be perfectly calm. The next, he'd be irritated because his tea was slightly colder than usual. Or because I'd taken too long to answer him. Or because I'd moved his pillow. Or because I'd spent 30 minutes working without touching him. One afternoon, his mother came into the room while I was rubbing his stomach. She watched Dante for a moment before asking casually, "Has he been having mood swings?" Dante immediately looked up. "Excuse me?" His mother paused. "I was just asking. Do you think I'm a woman?" She blinked. "Of course not. Or an Omega?" "No. I'm an Alpha." "Yes. A Mafia Alpha." "Yes, Dante." He nodded, satisfied. "I don't have mood swings." I looked at his mother. She looked at me. Neither of us dared say a word. Because we'd both seen him spend 20 minutes complaining about the temperature of his soup before suddenly pulling me into his arms and asking me not to leave. But Dante wasn't finished. "I don't behave like that." His mother nodded solemnly. "Of course you don't." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Dante narrowed his eyes. "Why are you both looking at each other?" "Nothing," I answered quickly. "Absolutely nothing," his mother added. He remained suspicious for a few seconds before finally settling against me. His head landed on my shoulder. His hand found mine and guided it back to his stomach. "Keep rubbing." I smiled. "Yes, boss." He closed his eyes. And as I looked down at my terrifying Mafia Alpha resting peacefully against me, I couldn't help thinking how funny fate was. The entire underworld feared Dante Moretti. But at home, he was simply my clingy mate. Carrying our 3 babies and demanding that I keep my hand on his belly. As the weeks passed, our home slowly transformed into a place built around 3 tiny lives. We had already known we were expecting triplets, but when the doctor finally confirmed that our babies were 2 boys and a little girl, Dante and I could hardly contain our happiness. I still remembered the way Dante had stared at the screen. 2 sons and a daughter, he murmured. I squeezed his hand. Our 3 babies. A rare, genuine smile appeared on his face. For once, the feared Mafia Alpha looked less like the man who ruled the underworld and more like a man who couldn't wait to become a father. The preparations began immediately. The nursery was arranged with 3 beautiful cribs lined up beside each other. His parents filled the room with clothes, blankets, and toys. Our security team was probably more prepared for 3 newborns than they'd ever been for an enemy attack. Everything seemed perfect. Except Dante was discovering a very uncomfortable truth. Carrying 3 babies was hard. Much harder than he had expected. As the babies grew, so did his belly. By the later months, it had become enormous, and there seemed to be nowhere on his body that felt comfortable anymore. Sitting hurt. Standing exhausted him. And sleeping? That became an entirely different battle. Most nights, Dante would lie beside me and shift every few minutes. This position is terrible. I'd help him turn. Better? No. I'd rearrange the pillows. Now? No. Eventually, I'd pull him carefully against my chest and support his belly with my arm. He'd sigh. Don't move. I won't. Promise. Promise. Only then would he slowly relax. Sometimes the babies would start kicking just when he finally fell asleep. Dante would open his eyes and stare at the ceiling. I hate them. I laughed softly. You don't. I love them. He sighed. But they're already making my life difficult. I placed my hand over his belly. A tiny movement pushed against my palm. They're saying hello. They're saying they want more space. There's already 3 of them. Exactly. I couldn't stop laughing. The babies were also growing surprisingly fast, which made everything even harder for Dante. Some days, his patience simply disappeared. One afternoon, after struggling to get comfortable, he suddenly smacked my arm. 3. I looked at him. 3 what? 3 babies. I know. You put 3 babies inside me. I raised an eyebrow. Technically, we both. Don't argue. Another light smack landed against my arm. I laughed. Dante pointed at me. When they're born, I'm punishing you. For what? For all of this. He gestured dramatically toward his stomach. Every sleepless night. Every painful kick. Every time I couldn't breathe properly. Everything. I leaned closer and kissed his forehead. I can't wait to see who ends up punishing whom. Dante stared at me. You think you're funny? I think my mate is adorable when he's angry. I'm not adorable. Of course not. I kissed his cheek. You're terrifying. Exactly. But then he'd quietly reach for my hand and place it against his belly again. And I'd know he didn't really mean any of it. The days continued like that. Long. Difficult. But filled with moments I knew I'd remember forever. Then we reached 8 months. The doctors decided it was time for the triplets to be delivered by C-section. Dante tried to act fearless. He failed. I could see the nervousness beneath his calm expression. But when the moment finally came, I stayed beside him. And after everything was over, 3 tiny cries filled the room. 2 boys. 1 girl. Our babies. I looked at Dante. He was exhausted, emotional and completely overwhelmed. But the smile on his face was brighter than anything I'd ever seen from him. They're here, he whispered. I kissed his forehead. They're here. His eyes filled with tears as he looked toward our children. Then he let out the longest sigh of his life. I'm never doing that again. I laughed. You said that months ago. I mean it this time. I smiled. You survived. Dante looked at our 3 babies again. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression softened. They were worth every bit of it. I reached for his hand and kissed it. And as I looked at our 2 sons and our little daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, I realized something. The man everyone feared had carried our entire world inside him. And now that world was finally here. Our family. The day we brought our triplets home, the entire atmosphere of the estate changed. For years, Dante's mansion had been known as one of the quietest and most heavily guarded places in the city. Now it sounded completely different. 3 tiny cries echoed through the halls. 3 little cribs stood side by side in the nursery. There were bottles on the kitchen counter, tiny clothes everywhere, blankets draped over furniture and toys slowly taking over rooms that had once been occupied only by expensive decorations. Our home had finally become a home. And somehow, 3 newborns had managed to do it in a matter of days. Dante recovered much faster than I expected. I had been terrified after the C-section, constantly checking whether he was comfortable and refusing to let him do anything unnecessary. But Dante was stubborn. Within days, he was already walking around more confidently and complaining whenever I tried to help him too much. I'm fine, Soren. I know. Then stop looking at me like I'm dying. I'm just worried. You worry too much. And you don't worry enough. He rolled his eyes, but I could see the smile he was hiding. I was simply grateful to see him getting stronger every day. And once Dante was completely recovered, something else returned too. His obsession with me. Apparently, becoming a father hadn't made him any less possessive of his mate. If anything, he became even more attached. After the babies finally fell asleep at night, Dante and I would often disappear into our room and spend hours together simply holding each other. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we said nothing at all. He would pull me against his chest and bury his face against my neck, breathing in my scent. I'd wrap my arms around him and breathe in his. It was strangely comforting. After everything we'd survived, the misunderstanding, the bond ceremony, the jealousy, the fear of losing each other, those quiet moments felt precious. "You're still obsessed with my scent," I teased one night. Dante didn't even lift his head. "Always." I laughed. "You have 3 children now." "I know. And you're still this clingy?" He finally looked at me. "They aren't my mate." I couldn't help smiling. "Possessive." "Very." I kissed his forehead. "I love you too." Our future slowly became something we could actually plan instead of something we were afraid to imagine. We decided that when the children were a little older, we'd have the wedding we'd never gotten to have. A huge one. A proper celebration. Dante wanted our families there, our closest friends, and eventually our children walking beside us. "I want it to be unforgettable," he told me. "Knowing you, it'll probably be the most expensive wedding in the country." He smiled. "It should be." I shook my head. "But I'd marry you even if it were just the 2 of us." His expression softened. "I know." And that was enough. Eventually, both of us returned to work. Dante, of course, made a dramatic announcement. "I am returning to business." His security team stared at him. "The mafia boss is back." One of his men looked like he was trying desperately not to laugh. Dante noticed. "What?" "Nothing, boss." Another man finally muttered. "Sir, it's just hard to believe." Dante raised an eyebrow. "Believe what?" The man glanced at him. "That a few months ago you couldn't even walk properly because your stomach was so huge." Silence. Another security officer couldn't resist. "We genuinely thought you'd never leave that couch." I covered my mouth, trying not to laugh. Dante slowly turned toward them. One cold look. Every man immediately straightened. "Understood, boss." I finally burst out laughing. Dante looked at me. "You too?" I didn't say anything. "You were laughing." Very quietly. His eyes narrowed. But after a moment, even Dante's lips twitched. His men relaxed. And just like that, the feared Mafia Alpha was back. The man who could silence an entire room with one look. The man whose name made enemies reconsider their decisions. Except now, when he returned home, he wasn't simply Dante Moretti anymore. He was a father. A mate. And the man who would immediately forget his terrifying reputation the moment one of his babies reached for him. Our lives eventually settled into a new rhythm. Work. Family. Late-night feedings. Quiet mornings. 3 babies growing a little bigger every day. And endless moments between Dante and me. Nothing was perfect. Our home was louder. Our schedules were harder. Sleep was rare. But we were happy. Because after everything fate had thrown at us, we had finally built the life neither of us had dared to dream about. Dante had his empire. I had my work. We had each other. And 3 beautiful children who filled every empty corner of our lives with laughter, chaos, and love. Life had returned to normal. Only our version of normal now came with 3 tiny heartbeats, 2 exhausted parents, and a love neither of us could ever escape.